For those who don't know, the nuclear option, or as it's called in Washington, the nuclear option, this is an extreme procedure in the Senate, or the last step, the most radical step of all possible, and it is being proposed to the Senate by the President of the United States of America, Donald J. Trump. So filibuster. The minority party, according to Senate rules, can delay the vote indefinitely because to end the debate on a subject, you need not 51 votes out of 100, but 60. But you can kind of bypass the rules and vote with a simple majority, that is, 51 senators or 50 senators and the vice president, and decide that this particular issue can be resolved by a simple majority, that is, well, not a minimum, but a simple majority of 51 votes. Senators usually don't like to do this because it's one of the main obstacles preventing the majority party from taking all the power into their own hands. And everyone understands that today you have the power, tomorrow someone else does, so generally they don't want to mess around with this tool. It still provides some protection, yes, in special cases. This is the right of the minority, and it's called the filibuster. The Democrats abolished it for judicial appointments, setting a kind of precedent. After that, when Trump came to power, he appointed 3 conservatives to the Supreme Court without the consent of the Democratic Party. So the Democrats really didn't like that. Yeah, really. Now the Democrats tried one more time, but for a different reason to, so to speak, abolish the filibuster as well. But because of 2 of their own, that is, 2 Democrats, Manchin and Sinema. But they didn't allow it, they stopped. So the first half of 2026 will show whether the Republicans will keep Congress or if it will go to the Democrats. And they, of course, will start new impeachments, trials, and delays. And if Trump is allowed to carry out reforms, it will give a boost to the economy and the standard of living. Well, the Democratic senators aren't allowing it. They're doing everything they can to stop and obstruct it. And Trump wants to abolish the filibuster in order to carry out certain reforms, because you see, Sinema and Manchin are pushing the Senate toward this. They say that the Democrats have already done it twice and will definitely do it a third time. So they set, so to speak, a precedent to stifle the free market. We need the right to implement reforms to turn America back to our original goals, and with the filibuster, we won't be able to do that.
The Democrats have basically lost control of the country's power because we kicked them out. And now they're just trying to crash the economy to undermine Trump's agenda, America first. Fortunately, however, apparently the Trump administration has pretty high expectations for 2026. Take a look.
I think we'll see significant acceleration in the economy in the first and second quarters, and I think we're already seeing this in many prices. As I said, we're bending that curve downward, and real income is growing. I think Americans will feel it in the first quarter, in the second quarter. I think 2026
year,
thanks to President Trump's landmark plans, will be a great year for working Americans, for the markets. I call it parallel prosperity. Main Street and Wall Street can both succeed, but I think Main Street is in for a great 2026. If
Scott Besson is right, then the market will soar, prices will go down, and wages will go up. By the way, part of our problem is the 15 billion or more people who are taking jobs from Americans. And for the Americans who lost their jobs, we pay them unemployment benefits, food stamps, financial aid, health care, housing assistance, and education. It doesn't all happen to one person at once. Part of these benefits go to those who came here and have no right to be in America, no right to this money. At the same time, Americans would pay much less in property taxes, income taxes, road taxes, and school taxes if there were no illegals. And illegals don't pay it. Even when they work, they don't pay because they work for cash, not legally. So, one illegal costs us, from $87,000 to $110,000 a year. In California alone, expenses exceed $31 billion a year. In Texas, it's $13 billion. Educating the children of illegals across the country costs us $78 billion a year. And besides, not only is it about the money, it also lowers the quality of education in United States schools because a bunch of people have come who don't understand anything, who don't even understand English, who are behind, who need things explained to them over and over, who don't know how to behave, who need to be stopped. So instead of teaching, the advanced students, they're teaching the least advanced ones. Legal and administrative expenses for illegal immigrants reach up to $47 billion annually nationwide, with services costing $42 billion in BC. So basically, we're getting close to $200 billion a year, and we haven't even taken into account everything that should have been considered. Getting rid of illegal immigrants. In other words, it's also a financial issue.
I believe that a significant part of the inflation we've experienced in recent years is caused by the fact that we've let millions of new people into the country without enough growth in the housing stock and other fixed capital. That's right. The truth is, they need somewhere to live. And if they're living somewhere, that's a place where other people in America aren't living. And that's a problem. And that was inflationary. Changing border policy to reduce net migration to zero or even negative through ongoing deportations is, in my opinion, very disinflationary, as it's the opposite of recent trends.
So friends, if you think about it, it's just common sense. Each of the 25 million illegal migrants who have come to this country under Biden takes up space and uses resources. They drove up housing and rent prices. They ate food and drove up grocery prices. Everything. Absolutely everything. And fortunately, now we have economic data to prove beyond any reasonable doubt just how much of an economic burden all these illegals were. In fact, all these illegals flooding the country, that's one of the main reasons why inflation has become so astronomically high in the Biden era. Because, again, every illegal is basically competing with you for resources, whether it's housing, food, or jobs. And admitting more than 5 million illegals every year has had a detrimental effect on our economy, so inflation has just skyrocketed. And now, as all these illegals are starting to be deported, we're actually seeing inflation go down and prices beginning to stabilize. And
more about inflation.
First, if you look at inflation history, yes. What happened was that there was reckless spending by the Democrats under Joe Biden, and inflation rose to almost 10%, averaging 5% over 4 years. And this created a situation where, for example, mortgage rates increased. So the average monthly mortgage payment almost doubled. A bag of groceries that cost $400 a month when President Trump left office now costs $550. Second, go ahead, Professor Kind, se acompañe, me parece que Yana. It's about the goods to Moscow. We understand that. Parliament, because we receive. Yes, President Trump, it has already increased by about 1,200. We understand that people still feel the pain of high prices, but we are quickly reducing and closing this gap.
After the elections, which took place less than 2 weeks ago, the White House began to shift its priorities from foreign to domestic policy.
I know, Sean. Many people say that everything is expensive, but we have to remember it's like this because we inherited a terrible inflation crisis from the Biden administration. But you can already see signs of improvement. The price of eggs has dropped a lot, the price of energy has dropped a lot, the price of gasoline has dropped a lot, and as we know, when the price of energy goes down, it starts to spread throughout the entire economy. But it also takes some time. There's another component to this, Sean, which for me is perhaps the most important, because it's very important to me that our young people can live with dignity. Many young people think housing costs too much. Why is that? Because we flooded the country with 30 million illegal immigrants who rightfully should have been opportunities for American citizens. Also, we didn't build enough new homes to meet the needs of our existing population. That's why we're trying to make it easier to build homes, easier to build factories and things like that so people can have good jobs. We're also deporting all these illegals from the country. Do you already see how that's bearing fruit?
The price of gasoline hasn't actually changed over the last 300 days. Well, just a little bit. But in 2026, an increase in oil production in the United States is expected. A price decrease because of this from dollars 3.10 per gallon, which is the current national average, to dollars 2.90 per gallon. It's a small change, of course, 6%. But what's important is that fuel prices aren't rising, they're decreasing. Well, that is, unless there are major wars, disasters, conflicts, or events that are impossible to predict. By the way, the United States is actively deporting illegal immigrants, and this will also affect inflation and housing prices, which were, of course, driven up by millions of people who didn't actually need that housing.
If we talk about the people who left this country through the Customs and Border Protection Home app, those who left voluntarily, and those we actively detained and deported, their number exceeds 2 million people. Since the Trump administration came to the White House, this is an incredible record number of people who were here illegally and have now left the country. And if you think about the consequences of this, the amount of resources that are freed up to focus on American citizens is astonishing. That's the good work that President Trump was able to do. I would say that by the end of this year, the number of people detained, arrested, and deported will exceed 600 to 650,000, and to that will be added many who voluntarily return home.
We arrest and deport criminals and people who came here for work but can't find it. Register, receive $1,000 in relocation assistance from the United States. In other words, we pay $1,000 just for a person to leave here, and tickets. Well, I don't know, by buses, by planes, basically they are taken out of here, they leave. But because they left on their own and we didn't deport them, we didn't spend time or money on that. Yes, they get the right to apply to come, and if we need workers, they, so to speak, will come here. The country will let them in, gentlemen. In the next video, I will talk about the new Mexican Revolution that was sparked by Trump without intending to influence the domestic policy of our neighbors, of course. Well, just like with Canada, by launching the process of separating two provinces from Canada, like with European and right-wing parties, giving them strength and determination, the same happened in Mexico. Tens of thousands of young people, this so-called Generation Z, took to the streets, primarily in the capital and other major cities, demanding government agreement. But Trump's proposal to jointly rid the country of cartels, before they didn't have the slightest hope. But Trump gave them that hope. And also, well, back in my time, as I used to say, you probably know this, somewhere around 1973-74, about 50,000 Russian citizens left the country. Under, so to speak, the agreement with Kissinger, the deal was that mostly Jews, Germans, and a few Poles were allowed to leave in exchange for 1 million tons of grain, which the Soviet Union had to find somewhere because a famine was simply starting. So after these people left, suddenly word spread across the country that it was possible that there was a way out. And when there's no way out, no one does anything. But when there is a way out, even if it's a very small chance, there's still an option. And off it went. There's a chance for freedom. And this had an impact on the Soviet Union. Well, if there hadn't been any other reasons or causes, of course. Not just one thing, no, but when several things come together, that's what we call a pressure cooker. That is, so to speak, the pressure started building up from inside. A distant light at the end of the tunnel, but there is a light. And for Mexican youth, that light at the end of the tunnel suddenly broke through. The next episode will be about this in Phenomenal. This is no longer just an event. It's a series of events that are happening with our southern neighbor. If you want to get quality content, subscribe and hit the bell. The door to information is open, it will remain open, And together we'll learn much more about the world than just by watching the news, or as they say, surfing the waves of the internet. See you next time.